Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Snyder Ritchie, and today I'll be sharing my research project titled Educational Equity in Access in Kindergarten, Addressing Systemic Barriers in Teaching Practices that Impact Students of Color. This topic is deeply meaningful to me as an childhood educator because kindergarten is where learning truly begins, and equity must begin there too. My research explores how systemic equity inequities, teacher practices, and classroom environments shape the experiences and outcomes of young children of color. Throughout this presentation, I will highlight what I discovered, what surprised me, and the findings will influence the way I teach, support families, and advocate for fairness in education. I hope this presentation not only informs but inspire reflection about how we as educators make inequity, can make equity a daily practice in our classroom. Let's get started. How do some kindergartners start school with confidence while others are already behind? Many students of color face inequities before age 5, including unequal preschool access, limited exposure to academic readiness and activities, fewer culturally responsive learning environments, implicit bias in early learning settings. These differences appear before kindergarten even begins, setting unequal starting lines. This question drives the research. Kindergarten should level the playing field, but many students being at a disadvantage due to barriers and existed long before school officially starts. Introduction. Kindergarten is where students develop early identity, confidence, and foundational academic skills. However, systemic, oh, however, however, systemic inequities create uneven starting points for students of color. These include underfunded early childhood programs, inconsistent access to quality preschool, cultural mismatch between teachers and students, biased disciplinary practices, limited family engagement support. The study explores how these inequities affect kindergartners of color and what teachers can do to build a more equitable classroom environment. Chapter 1 outlines the purpose of this research, understanding how inequities show up in kindergarten and how educators can actively address them through daily classroom decisions. Inform the audience. Significant findings. Students of color face inequities before kindergarten, including biased evolutions and limited access to early learning. Teacher diversity reduced exclusionary discipline and increased students belong. Early academic gaps, especially in STEM, appear by kindergarten entry. Culturally responsive teaching significantly improves engagement, identity, and school connection. Inequity, what I learned, inequity begins earlier than most people think, before age 5. Everyday teacher decisions directly impact equity. Kindergarten is a crucial year for shaping identity, motivation, and competence. What was affirmed? Students thrive through their culture, language, and identity are reflected in the classroom. Strong relationships are the foundation of equitable teaching. What surprised me? The extent of racial disparities in discipline at kindergarten age. How heavenly early special education identification is influenced by systemic bias. Um, what didn't surprise me, that students of color experience less representation in early childhood classrooms, that culturally responsive teaching increased belonging and participation. How this research will affect my teaching, I will intentionally choose culturally inclusive materials, text. I will restorative practice in exclusionary discipline. I will actively confront and reflect biases in daily teaching decisions. I will build strong, trusting relationship with families of diverse background. I will advocate for equitable early interventions and access to services. Chapter 2 of my research highlights what scholars have found about systemic inequities and the importance of culturally responsive teaching. Literature review findings: students of color disparately placed in early childhood education, special education programs due to bias evolution systems, large STEM gaps appear by kindergarten, influenced by early learning, same race teacher, inclus- exclusionary discipline, culturally responsive teacher supports identity, belonging, and social emotional growth, and equity that impairs at kindergarten entry often predicts later academic performance, graduation rates, and social outcomes. Overall, the research shows that early equities have long-term effects, making equity in kindergarten crucial. Um, Existing research that guided the study disparities in early childhood access, um, the impact of teacher diversity, evidence of racialized discipline patterns, inequitable teaching, um, inequitable finding of structures of, for early program, importance of culturally responsive, how kindergartens culturally identity develop with the classroom, the role of teaching the role of teacher training in reducing biases. Addressing these gaps can strengthen the field of childhood education and improve long-term for students of color. This research can directly influence my teaching philosophy and classroom practices. I plan to integrate culturally diverse students, books, visuals, and learning materials every day, building strong relationships through identifying, affirming conversations and routine, use restorative, uh, exclusionary discipline, recognize and challenge explicit biases in my own practices, promote family engagement that honors cultural language and community, advocate for equitable access to intervention, support services, and enrichment. The practices ensure students of color fairness and opportunities at the beginning of their school journey. Teaching must reflect students' background, culture, and identities. Classrooms must use restorative, supportive behavior systems. Curriculum should include diverse, informing content across the subjects. Equity must be integrated, not separate from academic instruction. Teachers have a responsibility to challenge inequities, not ignore them. Students of color deserve representation, dignity, and belonging. Education involves must evolve too. New research helps teacher begin the diverse learning. Reflective practice represents prevents biases and strengthens professionalism. This chapter explains why education research is essential and why it influences teaching ethicals. Thank you so much for listening and engaging with my research. The study of Thorne confirmed how powerful kindergarten truly is, and not just academically, but socially, emotionally, culturally. These findings showed me that equity must be must begin in early and must be intentional. I learned that systemic barriers affect students of color long before they enter kindergarten, but teachers have an incredible powerful to disrupt these inequities through culturally responsive practices, relationship building, and restorative discipline. What stood out most to me is representation, identity, and belonging, not just extras. They are essential part of learning. This research will continue to shape the way I create classroom environments, advocate for families, and approach teaching at the center. Moving forward, I hope to expand this work by studying how culturally responsive practices influence kindergarten readiness, family engagement, and long-term student confidence. Thank you for being a part of my conversation. I'd love to open up the floor for questions and reflection you may have. Thank you.